Welcome. Today on Metaconscious Leaders, we're joined by someone whose work sits at the heart of human potential and organizational transformation. Nadia Nagamootoo is a chartered psychologist, received her MBA at Henley Business School. She's a leadership coach and the founder of Avenir, a consultancy helping organizations transform and move beyond buzzwords to embed genuine diversity, equity, and inclusion. She is also an award-winning thought leader, best-selling author of Beyond Discomfort, host of Why Care podcast, and her clients include AstraZeneca, Nestle, Warner Brothers, Starbucks, and many others. Nadia's mission is simple yet profound: to create workplaces where everyone feels they truly belong. So welcome, Nadia, to Metaconscious Leaders, and we're delighted to have you as our guest today.
Thank you so much for that very warm introduction. Thank you very much for having me, Greg.
You're very welcome. Been looking forward to this for a little while.
Yes, and me.
Can we start, Nadia, with what in life has prompted you led you to fulfilling this mission that you're on? Because it's not always straightforward, is it? It's a topic that has some easy ground, but also has some quite difficult ground. And yet I've seen you in the public space with holding the public space with immense presence, poise, and clarity. Your mission clearly arises from a deep space, and would love to get a bit of a flavor as to where that arises from.
It's so funny. So I'm in my 40s now, and I think it's only come together as to why my path has taken me towards this ultimate kind of sense of purpose. I do see it as a purpose that I have, a very deeply held one, linked clearly to my values. But it didn't start there. It started from being a psychologist. Ultimately, I was fascinated by human behavior, social behavior, organizational behavior. And it led me to choices in my career and in my learning to follow a route down occupational psychology. So very much into the sort of the organizational culture, leadership behavior, and how that contributes to the success ultimately of an organization and its people being happy and healthy and committed and feeling like it's a space that they want to be. And so, that's kind of where my career had led me. And I followed it just through intrigue and curiosity of human nature. But of course, as I get older and I start exploring, there were moments in my life where, I don't know, it sort of dawned on me that I had experienced, because of my diversity characteristics, because of who I am, my identities, that actually the world and organizational life and society wasn't equitable, wasn't fair in so many ways. And only in processing what happened to me in my life, and there's a lot of that in my book, in Beyond Discomfort. If anyone's read it or reads it, there's a lot of me in that book as I reflect on where leaders get stuck. Because I was interested in supporting leaders in this space of creating more inclusion, a workplace that is more inclusive. What does that mean anyway? And in reflecting on my own experiences as a first generation UK born Mauritian girl, going through school, the bullying that the racism, I don't know, just the feeling of never quite fitting in, and how that was how that played out in my life and continues to, particularly because I'm quite petite, because I don't necessarily look like I don't know, like I might have something important to say. According to how society views people who have important things to say, they don't necessarily always look like me. And so how I've compensated that. So I thought that I've done a lot of self-reflection, which I think is evident in the book, around how I then show up in the world to try and counter how people might perceive me, so that I can, to gain that credibility that I want. I work in the corporate space. I work in the business space. It's really important that people take me seriously. And so there's so many moments that happen that I was able to capture and go, how does that reflect how society and organizational life is? How might other people be experiencing that in different ways? who have different intersectional characteristics. And so it led me down this path of finding out more about me, but also then how that informs how leaders choose their decision making, the outcomes of organizational life and culture, how it informs how everyone experiences that environment.
And having walked the walk, you are then able to assist other people in their journey as well.
Yeah, with always with the humility and sense of I don't have all the answers. I don't know every single person's experience in life. I could never even assume that I have a fraction of that information, but hoping that I lead from a place of openness to receiving new information and understanding, hopefully role modeling inclusive leadership, not perfectly, never perfectly, but always willing to learn.
Let's talk about your very popular book now, Nadia, and how there you set out the case, as it were, for DEI, starting perhaps with the title. And I see you got the book there
Yes.
on your shoulder, so please bring it to the screen and show us it. I really like the title,
Thank you.
Beyond Discomfort. What does that mean to you personally, and how did you come to choose that as a title for its brilliance?
It was so apparent to me that having facilitated conversations with leaders globally, that all of that anger, frustration, confusion, hurt, like there was a lot of emotion there as people were trying to understand what is this thing called inclusive leadership. Some of them were saying, well, quite honestly, I see people as people. Humans are humans. It doesn't matter. I don't treat them any differently, no matter what their color. I don't treat them any differently, no matter their gender. Fair is fair. And there were other people who were thinking and saying quite overtly in conversations, this thing called diversity, equity, inclusion, it's just taking it too far. We're going to reverse discrimination now. And people like me, I'm a white, cis, hetero male. I don't stand a chance. I don't have a voice around the table at all anymore. And let alone trying to get that promotion because the quotas are all for getting more women, for example, or more ethnic minority. There was so much, it was so tangible, the discomfort being, in order for me to accept this alternative view of what inclusion and inclusive leadership means, because a lot of them were saying, I see myself as inclusive leader. What else do I need to do? Because I treat everyone how I would want to be treated. And that's as inclusive as it gets. And so there's a lot of discomfort around holding a mirror up to yourselves, the self-analysis, the introspection that's needed to really go back to your values, your beliefs, how you have walked through the world and how the world has treated and perceived you in comparison to the person sitting next to you or the person on the train opposite you. People who are different to you, and naturally taking away that assumption that everyone just gets treated exactly the same no matter who they are, and realizing and recognizing that it's possible that certain decisions you've made in the past, because it was through your own lens and your own lens alone, that you may have inadvertently created barriers or misunderstood or misjudged or miscommunicated, hurt certain people simply because you hadn't necessarily considered or thought that they might be
Is
different.
this where unconscious biases, for instance, come into play, or unconscious prejudices, if I call them that?
Yeah. I mean, unconscious biases and prejudices is around human nature and recognizing that we like to be with people who are like us, for example. That's an affinity or a similarity bias, or that we might hold certain beliefs. And I sort of reference this in some of my workshops, where some people have a belief that if you're wearing brown shoes to an interview, then you can it's just poor judgment and you should never wear brown shoes for an interview. And therefore you can't be any good at this job and you certainly won't fit here. So those are the unconscious biases, our beliefs that drive our decision making, but we never stop to analyze them. We never stop to really consider how those beliefs that we hold might not be fact. It might not be fact, right? That someone who supports Tottenham Hotspurs is not going to be suitable as a team member of mine because I support Man U. How could we ever get along? It's possible that that person might actually be good at the job, despite their poor choice in their football team. I mean, I don't support any football team. I have to say that now. So
I thought we were going to have a confession there.
no, that was just an example.
Okay.
So there's that in understanding the beliefs that you hold and how it drives your decision making, and therefore the outcomes in your whole life, from where you choose to live, who you choose to partner with or marry, where you go for everything. It drives everything. And no one really takes the time to self-reflect that deeply to understand those. And so when we're making decisions around recruitment or promotion, or when we're leaders in an organization, it's really important to have done that work. I suppose what I'm asking leaders to do is take it a step further and lean into the discomfort, go beyond the discomfort, right? Of recognizing that because of who I am, the world has treated me and seen me in a certain way. And because of who designed the world, who designed the organizational system that I work in, who designed the society, which is predominantly a patriarchal society. I'm talking very UK centric, but in many cultures, it's more patriarchal. That when I, as a white man, right, walk through the world will treat me in a certain way, and that there will be times where I will have walked through a door because it was just open and I didn't even see that there was a door there because it was just literally a path that I just walked through. And I got to the heady heights of my career, not solely because of how brilliant I am, but possibly a little bit also because those doors were open for me, because the people who were opening those doors saw me and liked me more, but simply because of the color of my skin or because of my gender. And they saw a similarity in me to them. So again, you can see how it ties into some of those biases that we're talking about, but this is now more deeply to kind of go, and I have to hold that discomfort that I may have earned my successes not purely because of my talent, but alone. But there might have been some unearned advantages that I have. And that's hard. It's hard for people to consider that other people may be equally as deserving as them and just haven't, that it's not just been on merit alone that they've done so brilliantly well in their career, and other people may have been overlooked.
And then that awareness gives one the opportunity to reshape a future that's different, or with that awareness, bring that into one's own leadership to expand for the next generation what it means to be inclusive and what it means to embrace diversity and get more benefit from the full spectrum of humanity rather than just a narrow slice of it.
Exactly. However, the discomfort is also that it feels like that change that you've just articulated is so significant and so huge and almost threatening to those who currently have power and advantage in ways that are often intangible. It feels like we're asking them to let something go, let some of their power go in order for other people to take it. And how do you measure? How can anyone ever measure the advantage that they've had simply because of the color of their skin, or simply because of their gender, or simply because of their neurotypical?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm neurotypical, and over the years, as neurodivergence has become more and more understood, still a long way to go, and it's become more prevalent, and I've realized that there were some people who was probably struggling in my class at school who I just wrongly assumed just weren't as clever as me. You just sort of, it's like, how come they're not getting it? Or how come they're so disorganized? How come they're always late? Or, how come they can't focus? I was like, this annoying person who's always distracting the whole class.
Okay,
And I've never thought, do you know what I mean? Like I've never
Yeah, I do.
thought that that
So look,
it could be the case.
we're going to come on to the psychology of it in a moment, Nadia, because
Okay.
we really want to lean into your knowledge in that area, because I think it's a really interesting combination here. Just before we leave the topic of your book, though, I think the model that you use in your book, representing the various stages or states within people's journey on DEI, I think it's really good. The 2x2. Would you talk us through that? I find that I can place myself on that 2x2, and I also can notice that it's contextual. So
Yeah,
in one context
100%.
I will be in one place, in another context I'll be in a different place. So I think
Yes.
it's really helpful.
It's really important to note that whilst it is a 2x2 and there are boxes, that this was never designed to put people in a box and a box alone, right? Because we're human, because we're multifaceted, we will float and move between them, depending, as you say, on the context. I call it a way of being because it's something that evolves and shifts and changes over time and over contexts. And so on the horizontal axis, you have a willingness to act towards an inclusive endeavor. And on the vertical axis, you've got their receptiveness to learning. How open are they to learning about themselves? But also, how open are they to learning about people who are different to them? So in the bottom left-hand corner, you have what I call a disconcerted leader. So their way of being is very much seeing the world as a meritocratic system and they believe, so very similar to what we've been talking about. They find it hard to recognize that they may have progressed their careers for anything else other than how brilliant they are. And they feel like they're being penalized now for who they are. They can no longer speak, without someone shutting them down because they can't, how can they be inclusive? Because they have never experienced anything, so they really feel quite hard done by. And I understand that
Yeah.
a lot, actually. And we can come on to that afterwards. But so I can empathize wholly. I don't think necessarily those who've been working in diversity and inclusion have always brought everyone with them. And it must have felt a lot of the time like it was a fight against certain groups of people, which is not inclusive, really, is it? So they're those leaders who feel the pendulum swung too far in the opposite direction. You've got the top left-hand corner, which is a proof-seeking way of being. And these leaders, they're high on receptiveness to learning. They want to understand, but then they're always looking for data and evidence to demonstrate how much more I should give, for example, to this person in my team compared to this person in my team, because this person's neurodivergent. And there's no measurement for it because, equity and inequity is often invisible. And they're looking for the tangibles. They're looking for, I need to know, tell me specifically what I need to do to be inclusive, to be fair, and I'll do it. And they're always led down this path of questioning, well, how do I really know that someone's telling me that they have been treated in a certain way because they're Black? Is that possible? Well, yeah, it is possible, but it's also possible that they're being treated that way because they haven't done their job properly, right? And that person, they're just simply being performance managed, just like anyone should be performance managed. So how do you actually tell the difference, right? So that's proof-seeking leaders. And then the bottom right-hand corner, you have those people with a cheerleading way of being. And these people, they really have positive intent. They are willing to act toward an inclusive endeavor. However, they have this belief that in order to be inclusive, we shouldn't label people and see people's color of skin or see people's sexuality or see people's disability. We should just treat everyone exactly the same, no matter who they are. And of course, we understand, those working in this space, that actually inclusion is more than that. We can't just treat everyone exactly the same because the world is not treating everyone exactly the same. And those discomfort of recognizing, they feel like if I see your color, I must be racist because I'm seeing something about you that's different and therefore I might. And there's a lot of discomfort with navigating the complexity of seeing people differently. And there's a lot of discomfort for them of misstepping, because if I start treating people differently, that means that I could be inadvertently favoring
Yep.
certain people, and then I
Yep.
could come under trouble, and it opens up a whole can of worms. And then the top right-hand corner is the Beyond Discomfort corner, the quadrant. So high receptiveness to learning, high willingness to act. And this ultimately is a leader who takes the time to recognize them, who they are, that introspection that we've been talking about, the beliefs they've held, where they got those beliefs from, are open and willing with curiosity to take a real kind of magnifying glass and observe themselves first before even looking at other people. Understand yourself and lean into the discomfort that because of who you are, it has shaped certain things, certain outcomes in your life. And then start opening up with courage and humility, some conversations with other people who are different to you to just understand, that this leading beyond discomfort needs to come from a place of genuinely wanting to understand different people and their experiences. And with that knowledge, it's the behavior almost you can't, once you know something, you can't unknow it. And so when you see that there has been unfairness here, this isn't how I was ever treated. What's going on here? As a leader, your accountability is clear. You have to then do something about it. And then there's the courage to challenge a system. So the discomfort of then saying something and trying to change a culture within an organization to stand up for what's right.
And the context here as well is the recognition that diversity is a strength, and that within diversity, you can find for your company, for your organization, a much greater variety of talent that means that your organization and your business will develop a resilience
Mm.
that is incredibly valuable. So
Yeah.
it kind of, it's not, in a way, it's not just about DEI, it's about business now as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, it's a shame, but we still are trying to put forward the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion for a diverse organization. It seemed bizarre that we're still trying to sell it to organizations that they'd be better off. But because there's been so much pushback against diversity, equity, inclusion in the last year, particularly, a lot of organizations who weren't fully bought in are just kind of like, well, we're fine as we are. Why are we placing so much energy and effort into this? Look at our turnover, look at our financials, everything's good. So maybe this is a load of,
Well, that's why I said resilience. It builds resilience, because resilience is about longer term, and where it's headed. Excellent. Thank you for taking us through that 2x2, which is a lot more than just that grid, but very valuable, I believe.
thank you.
Can we look, Nadia, now at the psychology of this topic and lean into your knowledge as a psychologist? The subtitle, you were perhaps already moving in this direction. The subtitle to your book is "Why Inclusive Leadership is So Hard." How do we move past the discomfort and into a place of transformation so as to avoid the kind of box ticking, the sticky plaster bit,
Yeah.
and actually contribute to something which is really genuinely moving towards a different paradigm?
Yeah, well, we've sort of touched upon some aspects of why it's hard, that willingness to look deeply within yourself, to challenge yourself and acknowledge that you may have inadvertently hurt or disadvantaged certain people simply because you didn't know, you didn't understand. You may have said things, you may have asked questions. When we talk about language and diversity and inclusion, it's a sort of it throws up so much emotion and nerves and anxiety within people because they're so scared of misstepping, and it's easier to just steer clear and navigate around it rather than walking through the bold path of going, this is what I'm thinking the term I might use, for example, to describe you, or I'm interested in your heritage, but I'm not quite sure how to ask that question. Whatever to actually, rather than just not asking it at all or navigating around it somehow in some, hosh posh way, to actually ask permission to be able to say, I'm not quite sure how to ask this question. I'm not quite sure how you like to be referred to. Please, can you help me? And it's so simple, really. It's
Yeah.
not actually that hard to do that. But actually, it seems that the fear of getting it wrong, the fear of the complexity of who you're speaking to, or particularly if there's hierarchy in the room, or particularly because if you're challenging the power dynamics as well. So there's a lot. It's not just simply about the language. You're challenging a system here, and the system has been created by those in power. And when you're challenging power, it's very, very hard, because you then could end up in a very bad place. You might not get, you say something to challenge a system, and the next thing you know, you're out of a job, right? There's a risk. There's a huge risk to self-discovery and realizing, I'm not necessarily the great leader that I thought I was. And I talk in my book around trying to let go of this binary. Either I'm a good leader or I'm a bad leader. Maybe we're all of those things because we're human. Right. So there's this navigating that complexity, and then there's trying how hard it is to challenge a system. And that's what we're asking leaders to do.
And also within a business context, it's quite a competitive environment. And I've worked in big corporates myself. There are turf issues going on. There's all manner of things. And I've got my own personal career expectations and my family expectations and all of these things going on. And so it's quite a challenge to then, on top of all of that, become self-reflective and consider the things that you're talking about. And I'm just wondering, you mentioned the word fear there, whether identity comes into this, tribe comes into this, and fear comes into it insofar as at an unconscious level. Do we as humans, birds of a feather flock together, all that kind of stuff, do we as humans find it difficult to open up and embrace diversity for this reason? Because that may be one of the things that's holding us back from moving on from the current paradigm to one which is less conflicting, more inclusive, and one that through diversity actually enables us as humanity on a crowded planet in the middle of a meta crisis to find solutions which are genuinely sustainable, as opposed to simply being sticking plasters that get us a year down the road and tick a few boxes.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail there in terms of where we get stuck as humans, right? And it is, as a psychologist, I've analyzed human behavior, and what comes out time and time again, and we see it every single day. We see it in the news now, particularly with the world leaders that we have at the moment, where the narrative over and over again is it's us versus them. In so many ways, that if you listen to the language, it is we, us, as humans, it's within us to protect, obviously, those closest and nearest to us. So our families, that's number one. And then those people who we know, those people who are similar to us, will always have more affinity to those who are in our in groups, right?
Yep.
And we have lots of in groups. We are capable as humans of having belonging to lots of different groups at once. However, we like and we find comfort in creating us versus them. We like that. I mean, if you just think about the school system, you enter the school system and you're put into a house usually, right? And the houses then compete, and it's healthy competition. And of course, I think as humans also, there's a bit of a need to that. Competition isn't a bad thing, and that's not what we're talking about here. However, when it comes to creating us versus them to a point where we want us to do better and well, and we don't care how they do, that's when we've got a problem as humans. And that's where we're at the moment. I'm just going to do us, and we're okay. You do you, and that's nothing to do with us. We can't do, I don't think we can survive as a human species. And I will go that far to say that we cannot survive if we go that far when it comes to competition and boundaries. We need to care. We need to care about everyone. And we need to see that even though I'm happy with my in-group, and I'm not telling people not to form little groups, and I think that's just how humans are, but we do need to care that those people over there who we may not like very much, and we might not agree with them particularly, and we might see the world completely different to them, but we need to care that they're okay. And we need to care for their well-being, and we need to see that our ecosystem and their ecosystem are interdependent. We can't do well if they don't do well too. And I don't think as humans we're comprehending the extent of damage that we're doing to ourselves when we create such hate and boundaries and aggression towards others who don't fit with our own belief system or paradigm of what is right.
Yeah. So it's a significant journey, isn't it, for anyone, and especially for a leader who at the same time as making a journey of this sort is also having to lead and be accountable for a business or for their part of the business that they're managing. Do you see any parallel perhaps between a leader who is on a journey becoming more inclusive and the psychological journey of someone becoming or moving towards self-actualization, whatever that may be, however that may be perceived by an individual?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the concept of self-actualization is this this level of self-awareness and understanding of self. And you talk about meta-conscious leaders, and that's ultimately what we're talking about with self-actualization, is that leaders have an ability to think something, recognize that they've thought something, analyze that thought, and make a decision based on that analysis. So there's an additional step that's needed in decision making and thought patterns, basically, because often, because we're on autopilot and our brains are working incredibly quickly, that we have a thought and then we'll say it, for example, right? I mean, that's ultimately what I'm doing right now as we're conversing. I'm saying what I'm thinking. However, that meta-conscious leader, particularly in decision making when it affects a huge number of people, will think something, analyze, and then do, or think something, analyze, check their thinking, and then do, right? And so this is what we're talking about when it comes to inclusive leadership, that there's this understanding that you as a leader, you don't have all the answers, which can go against what a lot of leaders feel they should know and be, right? We have this sort of this archetypal leader who we've seen and I talk about it in my book, lots of the movies depict this like Indiana Jones type, Ethan Hunt kind of Mission Impossible type of leader who just kind of, this is all awesome person, usually depicted as a man. But when we're trying to live up to that, but we can't believe that we know everything. You can't possibly know everything there is to know about everything. So therefore, and I think it's so dangerous where you have leaders who don't dedicate the time to understand who they are, how their identity, how their upbringing, how all of their experiences collectively lead to every single decision that they make. They need to understand who they are ultimately, and then start unpicking that decision that I made. Where did that come from? Right? And that helps to then recognize, if you've done that work, you're like, actually, that's not the only decision I could have made. Yeah, it might have made sense to me, but it wouldn't have made sense to everyone, because if I'd had this experience or that experience or this had happened to me, I probably would have chosen something different. And then so this is how it's connected to inclusion ultimately and creating equity.
Yeah. So do you have practices and mindsets that you think that you would suggest to leaders who are moving along the pathway from performative box ticking inclusion to really authentic consciousness based or consciousness driven inclusion. It's almost like 3 steps or 3 easy steps. I don't want to trivialize it like that, but is there anything in particular that stands out?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing which is important, is to have a connection, body and mind, right? I don't think we can get to this metaconscious leader, this self-actualization, if there's no connection between what you're thinking and how that's experienced in your body, emotionally and physically. And it might sound a little bit kind of, I don't know, fluffy and light, but it isn't, because it's very hard, and it takes a lot of practice. It comes from practices like grounding, centering, mindful practices that people, regularly practice through yoga or other things, meditation. But ultimately what leaders, and I really think that there's an issue here, because with this 24/7, always on, fast paced, like the world that leaders are living in and need to operate in, where is the space and where is the time to do that work where you're actually entering a room grounded and centered and understanding what's going on for you, so that when someone says something that might activate you emotionally, that you recognize what's playing out in your body, and rather than the immediate throwback, pushback words that come out of our mouths, that as a leader in particular, and as an inclusive leader, you stop and you think. That can't happen unless you enter that, but there's no space for it. It's so, and I really believe this, that part is so critical to any form of leadership, inclusive leadership and otherwise. Like, it just being a good leader needs to come from a place of grounding and recognizing what's going on for you in your body. So that practice is 100% necessary. And in fact, I'm doing some work with a couple of women, a psychologist looking at physical intelligence, as well as a body sort of physical, like actually understanding your physicality and how that can shape your emotions. So Jane Wake and Silke Ermscher, and we're doing some work together to support leaders with this
Wonderful.
practice. And then it's about, once you've got to grips with that, actually it should lead to you being more aware of your inner voice, of what the thoughts are that are going on in your head that keep popping up. And for you then to, with curiosity, as we've spoken about, actually take that magnifying glass and asking yourself some questions about the words that are popping into your head. You might see someone who is, in your mind, is overweight and, struggling to get into the seat on the bus or on the tube or whatever. And maybe there's a thought that pops into your head about that person. What is it that you're holding about, perceptions of being overweight, about that particular person? What's the judgment? What's the belief? And to start asking yourself questions to challenge it. Is it possible that I might be wrong about that person? Is
There's
it possible
also
that I might hold something else?
there's also, as you talk there, a thing which I think is Marianne Williamson says, or does it come from the Course in Miracles? As we talk of others, so we talk of ourselves.
Mm.
So in terms of the scenario you just described there, to make the inquiry, what is the belief that I'm holding that underlies the judgment that I've just made? And in what way does that apply to me?
Yeah,
Because I can only perceive in someone else that which I already have represented within myself.
exactly.
And I suppose in the Bible, it's a quotation which I don't remember terribly well, but about taking the splinter out of your own eye before
Yes.
making a judgment.
Yeah. And we're not superhuman in the sense of, like, we're always fall into an immediate thought. So I'm not saying eradicate all thoughts that might hold judgment, but exactly what you've just said, that moment where you're like, that's interesting that popped into my head. I wonder where that's come from. Where might that belief be held within me? Where may I've learned it? Before you continue down a path of, you know,
Yeah.
whatever, being negative, being biased essentially towards a particular person. That's what bias is.
I think in a lot of these conversations, judgment tends to get a bad rap. And it's like, we shouldn't be judging people. We're
Oh,
automatically judging
of
people all
course.
the time.
Yeah.
The issue is not so much for me, it's not, am I judging? I'm going to judge.
Yeah. Accept
I
it.
am who I
Yeah.
am. The question is, am I aware of the judgments that I'm
Yes.
making and what underlies them? And then
Yes.
if I do that, I'm in the meta position that
Yeah.
enables me not to live with that, and I can be more flexible and adapted as situations arise or as I get more information.
Exactly. And that you've hit the nail again, in terms of what leaders get. If they lean into that discomfort, what they get is flexibility, adaptability, resilience, sustainability in their practice of, I don't see any other way, quite honestly, as if leaders are going to continue, or if organizations are going to continue being and evolving, the leaders need to be flexible, adaptable. They need to be responsive to what's going on. It's a turbulent marketplace, but everything's just really uncertain at the moment and quite scary in so many ways.
Yeah.
I can't see how leaders can survive from a well-being perspective, let alone actually to do the job that they're meant to be doing in the organization if they don't practice what we're talking about.
Yeah. And going back to resilience, the resilience is the ability to withstand or to have an answer to or a response or some kind of sufficiency to whatever occurs. And whatever is occurring now is pretty random.
Yeah.
It's random and serious, and it's unpredictable, VUCA,
Hmm.
volatile, ambiguous, complex, or no,
Uncertain.
uncertain, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And more so, I don't know if there's ever been a time that has been quite like we have now. There's been moments, obviously, of wars, and of course, but when you overlay the technological advancements with AI and the, generative, just it adds this layer of complexity because we've got social media and we've got information that we need to be able to
Yeah.
discern what's accurate, what's not accurate, be able to analyze things and rather than just take what we're sent as a given.
And it adds speed, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And with the speed comes the ability to do more things and therefore fill up more of our time with doing
yeah,
things and have less time for the reflective bit that just has us sitting back and
yeah.
considering. So coming back to the title of your book again, Beyond Discomfort, one of the things that I first came to mind when I first heard it was Rumi's lines, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field, I'll meet you there. And I see in the title that, this idea that, and I'm wondering whether it was kind of in your intention that beyond, that,
Mm,
beyond there is a field of awareness that is beyond our usual categories of right and
yeah.
wrong and how we behave and how we make judgments today. And that is something worth aspiring to.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in the title as you've pulled out, and as I explore more and more with people like yourselves and other people in workshops and sessions that I hold, that complexity is even clearer to me. How knotty this work is. And absolutely think that wherever we're stuck, wherever that discomfort or fear or whatever it is that we're holding that stops us from embracing a world where we can be okay to share it with other people who are different to us and not just share it, but actually want others to do well as us. That care, that kindness, that desire for the best for everyone. That does take a shift from where we are. It's sad to say, there's been times uh, um, over the last 6 months plus where I've just felt so disappointed with humanity in general. Like, how can we have lived for so long and still be at a place where there's so much hate and desire for self and only self and to
Mm.
be only just wanting, you know, it's sad. And I think that place that we're talking about, the beyond, the other side, certainly not here, wherever that place is beyond, is where we need to head to.
Yeah. So Einstein said that we can't solve problems at the level of thinking that created them. And I've used the term a few times about box ticking, which I see in ESG as well, and that's been talked about. What do you think, what in your experience is the level of thinking that generally is applied to DEI at the moment? And what's the level of thinking that we need to shift to?
I think where DEI has gone wrong, I can certainly speak to that, where those people who have been oppressed over centuries, those people, so we're holding a lot of ancestral trauma, right? So this goes back, through many, many years, that there's been an opening, a platform, things have happened and evolved where actually they're like, no more, no more. And actually I can say no more. And I've got a lot of people to back me and say no more. That those people who have a very personal agenda in this space, but without necessarily the having done the self-work to open up conversations. Like I've done a lot of work on myself as a coach, as a psychologist, as a, someone as a business person. Like there's a lot of facets to me, and having worked through in order to hold a space that you saw me do.
Yeah.
And be able to hold people's emotions, recognize that just because they're feeling something doesn't mean that makes them wrong or bad. They're just feeling something. So, okay, let's work with that. Let's understand where that's coming from. But there's been some people who have been working in the diversity and inclusion space that's like, if you're not with me, then you're against me. If you don't believe that we need to change things and that, certain people have done wrong, then you're bad, you're guilty, and what do we do as humans when we're holding guilt or shame? Well, we shut down even more. There's defensiveness, there's anger, there's the us versus them. So where we've gone wrong in many respects with regards to diversity and inclusion is creating more of a divide than the opposite, which is obviously the intention. And you can see how it's played out, again, because it's human nature. This isn't just, you hurt me. Like this is centuries of hurt
Yeah.
that's accumulated over time. And it's unfair to then point the finger at certain groups of people and go, you people, right? It's not, you haven't done anything. It's not you. However, everyone is accountable and responsible for creating the change, for seeing that something's not right in our society and our system, and to support a new normal, a new reality. So that's the first answer to your question, I think, in an analysis of
I think
where
that's
we
I
are.
think that's a really valuable acknowledgement to make in the conversation, Nadia, because
Mm.
it's certainly one that I think will resonate with some people. In terms of openness and transparency, I think it's, be open and upfront about it, and then that's something else that we address. Straightforward as that.
Exactly. There have been imperfections in how diversity, equity, inclusion has played out over the last 10, 15 years, that has led to a point where there is this now significant pushback, moving against diversity and inclusion as if it's a bad thing. Simply, it's not a bad thing. We've discussed that.
Correct.
It's the whole time on our conference. In fact, I believe, obviously, because I'm working in this space, it is essential. It is essential to every organization that they do the work in this space for their own performance, organizational performance, financial performance, sustainability in the long term, resilience in the long term. I believe it's essential. However, I can acknowledge that because it's hard and because it takes time and it needs to be applied and done with care and sensitivity and in the right way, that because it hasn't always been done that those who have had power, who are in power, can see that it wouldn't be fruitful, that it would be a pointless task, because we're focusing on something that's, we've put all this money in diversity and inclusion. What's changed? right? So you can see where the challenge comes from. And I think the shift needs to be where, particularly from an organizational perspective, that the business endeavor comes first. So your business strategy and your goals comes first. And then you look at the organization and see what needs to change in order for you to achieve that. And often aspects of diversity and inclusion is fundamental to you achieving that long-term goal. It can't be, we've got a business strategy and we've got our diversity, equity, inclusion strategy, and they just sit alongside each other without interacting. No, diversity and equity and inclusion needs to sit fundamentally as part of the strategy, because only then will you see how it's fundamental to you achieving your business
Yeah.
outcomes.
Nadia, I'm aware of time. I think you've got another appointment coming up very soon. So one final question. If
Yeah.
there was one mindset shift or one practice that you would leave with our listeners today, something that could move them forward in this regard, that you would love them to, or that you would suggest would be very useful, what would it be?
So, well, aside from reaching out for, conversation with me, I'd love to chat to people who are interested in this topic. But I think there's something around opening up, even if it's just one new conversation. Just open up a different conversation. If there's someone who you sit alongside at work, but you don't really talk to them very much, or you don't talk to them about particular things, maybe there's something about them culturally that's a bit different to you, but you've never really felt able to ask, you know? And I'm sure everyone can think of someone who they just haven't really spoken to much, but they spend time with or see every day. Open up a new conversation, right? See what you can find out. Where are the commonalities? What do you hold that might be similar? Rather than looking at them and thinking, gosh, you must be so different to you. I wouldn't even know what to ask you or what to say. Maybe you do have something to say, and maybe it might be interesting to learn a little bit about how they experience the world.
Every journey starts with a single step.
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadia. You've been a wonderful guest. Where can
Oh,
people find out about you, connect with you, find out
yeah,
more about DEI?
of course.
I'll put the links down in the notes below. But anything you would like to say in closing?
Yeah, so my website, nadianagamootoo.com, has information obviously about me, it's got the podcast show there, which is on the YouTube channel as well as on any podcast player. It's got information about my book, and on that website, it takes you to the book website where you can download free kind of survey, workbook, lots of things on the book website. And of course, the work that I'm doing under my business is Avenir. So it's avenirconsultingservices.com. And you can find out a lot there around our inclusive leadership programs, sponsorship programs, intersectional talent development, working on DEI strategy, stuff that we do with our clients, the programmatic work. So yeah, LinkedIn and Instagram.
Thank you, Nadia. You've been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for your time. Be well. Go well.
You're absolutely welcome, Greg. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. And if you did, please follow us, like us, and share with friends and colleagues. And also leave a comment, because it's really useful to know what you're thinking about as well. Until next week, thank you for listening and watching. Be well.